kind of dropped after all the odds, I think.
Director Weatherhead,
Present.
Director DeBoon,
Greetings from Creston.
Director Hewitt.
She's running late.
Okay. Director McLaren Coe.
You got it. Yeah. Nice work. Good morning.
Excellent. Good morning. Director Lunn.
I haven't seen her show up yet either.
Okay, thank you. Director Page. Director Lockwood.
Good morning.
Director Main.
See her.
Not seeing her either.
Director Watson.
I'm here. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Director Newell
Present.
and Director Castley.
Seeing him or Director Fight or alternate Director Fight.
Pardon me?
Oh, I think it would be alternate Director Fight, but I'm not seeing either of them here.
Oh, okay. And that's my list. Am I missing anybody?
If we could just add Brian and Kate as guests.
Okay.
I believe that's all of the councillors that I've seen on.
And I
Did I
sent
get
Director
last
Dave
one?
a text.
Sorry, that was Brian. What's the last name?
It's Councillor Brian Vogel from City of Casper
Okay, great.
and Councillor Kate Tate from the City of Nelson.
Thank you.
I know we're going to have an election, but could we have the alternate directors or the other guests give them speaking privileges? We can do that as supervision.
Yeah, I think we'll have to do that after the chairs are elected, I'm assuming. Yeah.
All right, thank you, everyone. So our first order of business, as it's the first All Recreation Commission meeting of the year, is to elect a chair for the year. And so everybody knows the process. I will call for nominations 3 times. If there are more than one nomination, then we will do an election. So I will call for nominations the first time.
I nominate Director McFadden.
Director McFadden, do you accept?
Yes.
Okay, so we have Director McFadden is one of the nominees. Calling for nominations a second time.
Director Lockwood's on the list.
Director Lockwood.
Thank you. No need. I was going to nominate Director McFadden. Thank you.
Calling for nominations a second time. Calling for nominations a third time. Mr. Manager of Community Services, we confirm your nomination and thank you for serving as chair for 2025.
Thank you. It's great. We will move on with the meeting. Let me find my space. I'll read the acknowledgement and then we'll make a motion to allow speaking privileges. We acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples with whose traditional lands we are meeting today. Can I get a motion to give Councillor Tate and Councillor Vogel speaking privileges?
So moved.
Great. Any discussion on that? Sorry, I'm just reading. Joe, do you want to read that, Lloyd? All those in favor? Okay. And any opposed? Not seeing any. Brian and Kate, you're welcome to speak. Zone some recreation. Great. Okay, moving on. Recommendation to adopt the agenda. Any additions or depletions or, so Director Newell, I see that you have a notice of motion on here. Do you want that put on the agenda? Is that why it's in
Yes,
the?
please.
Okay. I'll read the notice of motion that's in the chat. Notice of motion from Director Newell that it be recommended to the board that the junior teams in Nelson, Casper, and Creston be granted the concessions for the arenas with the normal percentages to be paid to the RDCK. Do we put that under new business? Is that what we're?
Yeah, I think that's where we need to.
Is there new business on the meeting? No. Okay, so put it, yeah. Director
Well,
Jones?
procedural question. I mean, a notice to motion of board is automatic and not discussed or debated.
Yeah.
This is not a notice to motion of board. Is this a late agenda item to discuss a notice of motion to board, which to me would be unnecessary because once it becomes a late agenda discussion item, it is automatically part of the minutes to go to the board. So I need to know, what are we doing? Are we trying to do a notice of motion to the board, which does not belong here? Or are we trying to do a late agenda item where we have a discussion?
Through the chair, a third option is it's a notice of motion for this committee, which means it would be on the next agenda.
So that was my assumption, is any notice of motion at a committee level would then go on to the next agenda for discussion. So my assumption was, but it's a good point. I don't actually know what Director Newell's, so Director Newell, I'll go to you. Is your intention that this is a notice of motion for this committee for the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay,
And Chair, we changed the wording. This is a notice of motion to the all rec committee, period, not the board.
okay. Oh, I see. I
That's the issue. It's
didn't
not
even catch that.
board.
Are you okay with that, Director Newell?
Well, the actual notice of motion that will be at the all rec meeting in June will state that it be recommended to the board.
That's good.
So we will discuss whether we recommend to the board was my intention. I don't care what it,
Okay, yeah, I get that. Is the motion that he's got in there?
Through the chair, notice of motion doesn't need a motion. It's simply a topic.
Yes, so it's fine the way it is. I can
Work
put
with
that.
Director Newell to prepare a motion that would go on this year's agenda.
Great. Okay, so we will add it for notice for our next meeting. Under new business, which doesn't get discussed, just needs to be adopted into the agenda. So we'll put it under number in between 8.2 and call it new business, because otherwise I have to adjust all the other numbers.
yeah, that was my intention. Chair, may I just need one more clarification,
Sure, yeah.
not to belabor things. Sorry, folks. This could also, through the chair, because this is all rec, I worded it for all three junior teams, but I also intend to bring it to Rec 5 specific for the Nelson Leafs, because I don't know anything about Castlegar and Preston and their arrangements. So maybe just a heads up or
Okay.
whatever.
Okay, Director, no, we'll leave it the way it is, because it's not for discussion right now. And then when it comes up for discussion at the next all rec, we can talk about the nuances of whether or not it actually applies to anywhere else than Nelson. Because if we're not adding it for discussion today, we're just adding it to know it'll be on next meeting. Great. Okay, so call for adoption of the agenda with that one addition for notice. Any discussion, more discussion on that? No? Okay, all those in favor? And any opposed? Not seeing any, great. Moving on, receipt of the minutes, the October 30th, 2024 All Recreation Committee minutes have been received. Is there any discussion, additions, things we missed? Not seeing any, and we don't need a motion on that. Staff reports, going on to 7.1, financial access and improvement implementation update. Is that you, Tricia?
It is.
Okay, we'll hand it over to Tricia Davison. I think Joe's just pulling up the things. For those online, you probably know this, but please make sure you see the chat. I think I have most of your faces, but I might miss your hands, okay? If you have any questions. Thanks. Wait on Joe.
All right, so can everyone see the screen okay? Maybe just thumbs up from those, yep, okay, perfect, thank you. You're all now very, very tiny, so it's hard to see you. If you have any questions, I think the chair is monitoring the chat. We'll certainly open it up for conversation at the end. But this is a report that aims to give you an update on the financial access and inclusion policy and the implementation of the components that were comprised in that policy. So, okay, perfect. My technology is working. So in the policy, just as a bit of a reminder, there were 4 components. So there was a caregiver support component, there was a free and low cost programming component, support for vulnerable populations, and then the actual leisure access program itself. So this is just showing you kind of where we are at with that implementation to date. So the free and low cost programming is underway and we're monitoring that. You'll see a bit of information in the report on it. We've not provided direct information on the caregiver support component. That's underway and there's processes in place to manage anyone that requires additional support in order to access our services. And the leisure access program is one that we're monitoring because, as you'll see, we changed it as of January 1st, and there's some information we'd like to share with you. And the vulnerable population piece will be our last component to implement, and we are hoping that by the June meeting, we will be able to provide some update on that specific component. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the free and low cost programming initiative. So you may recall that we refer to these as cheer events. Our creative programming staff came up with the acronym that reflects community harmony for equitable engagement and recreation. So there were a couple of planning principles that actually we are important to remember as to how these services come to be. So one is that they had to be operationally feasible. So of course, at different times of the day, depending on the facility, depending on the day of the week, there might not be an opportunity to actually offer a reduced admission opportunity where we may be, drawing more people to come into the facility. So the times, the days of the week have varied and purposely to accommodate different demographics, as well as to provide different opportunities throughout any given month. So since October, we have offered these once a month in each of our major facilities. And in large part, it is to support those with financial barriers to participation. However, it is not exclusively for those individuals. So if people did come during that time and may not actually be somebody in financial need, that's okay. They would simply come in at the reduced rate for admission at that given point in time. So since October, we have offered 20 events in 4 different venues. So you can see the 4 venues there. We thought you might be interested in seeing the cross-section of the people that have attended and sort of what our attendance rates have looked like. So total admissions across the facilities are highlighted in yellow. So probably is no surprise that our highest admission rates came in Nelson, which is, our highest admission rates kind of overall come in Nelson right now. Creston and Castlegar sit comparable to each other. And Selmo, I believe, had, Tia can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Selmo had one event in that particular time span, but I can't recall off the top of my head. So you can also see the different demographics that came kind of across the event. So generally speaking, they've been well received. We haven't heavily promoted them, but the idea is that once we connect into that partnership with the vulnerable population group, is that we will be promoting this to those agencies that we will have partnerships with to really target the individuals that this particular service is for. So just a bit of information for your knowledge. So the cheer events, so what's important for our side of the department is to really understand what's happening during these particular activities and learn from them so that we can evolve the service over time. So operations side, so what's been really great to hear is that between the collaborative efforts of programming and the operations team, they've been able to successfully manage the delivery of this service. You can imagine that it does take some effort to think about what does it mean if we draw more people into a facility at any given time and need to have that planned and organized. So collectively, they've all recognized that that's working well, and they seem to have a strategy that manages that effectively. So we've definitely come across some promotional challenges, as we kind of have with promotion in general, trying to figure out how to reach the target audiences of the service. So I talked a little bit about some of our initiatives of using different avenues of partnership over time to kind of draw people to these. So on one hand, it's been nice to not have huge numbers of people coming in because we could test other avenues of the service that we were trying to create, as well as then see over time how we can slowly, continually improve and promote these initiatives. The scheduling, they are sporadic. We do get feedback that it's sporadic. Some people would prefer to know that it's on Friday at 3 o'clock every month, that this is the day and time that this activity will occur. Of course, for some people that works, but it doesn't actually achieve one of our objectives, which is to reach a large demographic group. Because for some cases, you know, children might be able to come at one time where it's not a good time for seniors or people that work or people that are on shift work. I mean, the list goes on as to the, obviously, all of our challenges of scheduling our day-to-day. So that's kind of one we're just watching, and maybe over time there might be some continuity in it, but at this point in time, it's really driven by the operational demand. Our admission procedures, we continue to evolve those, largely for reporting procedures, so that we can be able to capture admissions and report back to you on who's attending. You know, and a good example might be, well, how many leisure access participants are actually attending? Up to this point, we hadn't had a really good way of capturing that information, but we've adjusted some front-facing administrative processes to try and improve that over time. So I'm going to move on to the leisure access program, but maybe just before I do, I'll open it up for questions, if that's okay, through the chair on the cheer events, if there's any. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, I will continue on. Okay, so the Leisure Access Program. So as everybody knows, this program went through a bit of an overhaul. This committee has reviewed both the changes in policy and received updates from us over the last few months. But just as a reminder, a little bit about some of the goals of that particular program. So one is to create equitable access to our services for anybody who might be coming to our program services, and to expand our offerings beyond general admission and term-based memberships to also include programming. We definitely wanted to figure out ways to improve reporting practices and be able to provide you with more comprehensive information without having to spend huge amounts of staff time to data mine information just in the way it was set up previously. We wanted to improve the eligibility requirements and actually work with other government agencies that may already have adjudicated participants for other subsidization services. So we've actually added that to our eligibility requirements. It's not just a notice of assessment criteria anymore. Building community relationships. We really want to get out there and try to build some relationships with some key social service agencies, ideally ones that might serve all of our communities as a whole. That might not be possible, we aren't entirely sure yet. But to build those relationships and work with those agencies that serve the population that the Leisure Access Program is really geared towards, ideally to not just benefit us, but also to maybe help connect them to other services that they might not know exist. And then, of course, to improve the financial integrity of the program, we wanted to make sure that there were some bookends that we were reporting on and understanding where we were at as far as the degree of subsidization being provided to members. So currently, which is a bit of a confusing number to share, but I'll share it anyways. There are 1,189 active members in the Leisure Access Program. That's going to change quite dramatically, and I expect that number to be closer to 800 to 900 people. If you'll recall the process over the last, about a year to 18 months or so, was we automatically extended expiry on people in order to manage the changes of the program over time. So we didn't force a reapplication process in June of last year, and we rolled those people over. So all those people came over, as well as then there was obviously been some new people come in, but of course not all of those people are actually accessing service right now. There's just 1,189 people in the system to date. When we break that out, and sorry, the part of my chart is covered up there, but I can pull it up on my screen. So that breakdown of the, oh, look at that magic. move everybody. So the breakdown of the people within that 1,190 people is there's 314 youth members and there's 875 adult members. And you can see the breakdown by area within the district that, of course, thought might be of interest to you. And certainly you can sort of see where our biggest usage of the program is, but it's also, you know, it aligns with the biggest usage of our general facilities across the facility or across the district as well. So the subsidy allocation details. So these are just some topics that from the conversation that we had back in, I guess it would be October, possibly earlier, that I thought that were part of the discussion. I thought you might be interested in hearing a little bit more about. So we have allocated I'm going to call it $136,000 of subsidies. If you imagine that 1,190 people in the system, based on our policy of $100 per adult, $150 per child, has been allocated out to all of those people. So it sits on their accounts ready for them to use if they want to. But you can see that from January 1st to March 25th was when we pulled the report, $20,000 roughly of that 136,000 has actually been actively utilized. So adults have utilized about $16,500 and youth in about the $3,600 amount. So the other piece that was always the concern is, well, how many people have actually used all of the subsidy available to them? So since January 1st, there's been 35 people who have used all of the available subsidy to them. I can also tell you that in the time of actually developing this presentation, we have had 4 people come forward seeking that secondary amount of subsidy available to them, all of which fell to the government, had a government subsidy in place for some other service. I believe actually all of them were people that were receiving permanent disability assistance. And so we were able to say, you know what, we're going to accept your letter of approval for that secondary from that government agency and applied that secondary subsidy to those 4 individuals that is available to them until May 31st of this year. So where subsidy is being used, so the 3 main categories of usage are program registration, term-based memberships, or admissions. So memberships, which is an interesting one, that 77% of the usage comes from memberships. And if you think about the logic of that, on one hand, it might not make sense because a term-based membership does require you still to pay a component up front. And not everybody that applies to this program may be actually able to do that. But it also gives them the best bang for their buck. So even the funding that they do provide, because we have this built in, if you purchase more, you get a further discount philosophy into our fees and charges, it makes sense that they're saying, boy, it makes more sense for me to buy a 3-month pass. I can maximize my available $100 and I use the facility enough to be able to justify a 3-month membership. General admissions, it's general admissions. It's probably pretty self-explanatory, but it was nice to see that some people did start to use it for program registration. One other piece that just might be for information's sake is there's only been 1 registration date that has come and gone in this window of time that we're reporting on right now. So we expect that number to increase more dramatically as camp registration opens, summer registration opens, the next swimming lesson sets start. That type of usage we know is of grave interest to parents, and we'll probably see that number be utilized more going forward. The little chart on the other side is just simply giving you an idea of the subsidy utilization by location. So you can see that the largest utilization is coming out of Nelson right now, and then it's roughly equal between Castlegar and Creston, a little bit in Rec 8, and of course a small amount in Selmo at this point in time. So to me, this is the most important component of this slide, is the learnings that even in less than 3 months that we are taking away from this program to date. And some of them are, I believe, critical for consideration. And we will be reporting again in June to this committee, probably with some suggested wording changes to the policy that actually talk a little bit about some of these learnings and feedback that we've received. So, sorry.
Sorry, there's a really good point at what Tricia just said. I don't want it to get to just kind of a fade to the back. And that was the part about Rec 8. And to Walter, who's on the line. So when we're saying Rec 8, that's Area H South. So what that means is that in the past, that subsidy was carried by the service where it was done. In this case, that means that even if that person in Rec 8 was utilizing that for memberships in Nelson or a membership in Castlegar, people there tend to go left or right, that subsidization portion is allocated to the taxation area where that person is coming from. So this is a new piece of the system that we haven't really seen how that works out. Now, it could also be that they registered in a program in Rec 8 and used that. We don't know that specifically, but just to know that that's a big fundamental change in the program.
So some of I've talked about some of these learnings already, but we have received a lot of positive feedback about the changes, and in particular in relation to the ability to register for programs. For some, I mean, it probably doesn't take much for you to consider what it might feel like to hear a parent come to you and say, my child has never had the opportunity to participate in swimming lessons unless maybe the school offered it or did it in some other way, but to know that I have that option now, and it's very warming to the heart to hear those conversations, and I know staff really like that, to be able to say, hey, this is an option for you, this is something you can do with your kids. From the adult side, definitely we are receiving, and I would say we have a feedback spreadsheet that we're collecting the comments that we receive from people, but I would say the majority of comments coming from adults is that the $100 is insufficient. So if you can envision paying for a 3-month membership, $100 would only give them that once in a given year, I believe, if my math is correct. Joe can probably do it quicker in his head. But so the idea being, if you're a frequent user, that $100 doesn't go very far for you. And for some people, I can speak to the 3 people that I've spoken to specifically, this is a life thing that they need in order to function in a day or a week. It's the ability to get up and go to the rec center and be a part of something, and to be able to do that 3 or 4 times a week is what makes their world go around in any given month. So it's a piece of information at this point in time that there's a few of those. I think it will be interesting to see after we get through the renewal process of the reapplication, how many people come back in, how many people start to use that subsidy again, and what happens roughly in around probably the fall all rec meeting will be an interesting point in time. So that's one that we're flagging in the background to pay attention to. The eligibility process for people, so there's definitely a suggestion to reconsider the requirement for third-party adjudication for those that have already received adjudication from another agency. So the way the policy reads right now is even if you have applied under something that verifying that you have received or are receiving government subsidy, whether it's for guaranteed income supplement, disability assistance, relocation assistance, that the way the policy reads is it still asks you to be re-adjudicated by just simply giving us that information. In talking to a couple of the people that are on permanent disability, it definitely makes you think twice when you go, why are you asking me to verify that I'm still permanently disabled? And it's not a very comfortable place to be. And so we have taken that to go, we hear you, we understand. It might be that the policy should read something like, if you have applied and have been verified providing that secondary or that government subsidy from another agency, that we automatically apply the full amount of subsidy available to you in that year. So that then at least they can go forward and use it in whatever way they like, but not have to go through, as some person told me, an inhumane way of being asked to be re-adjudicated. So I think that is probably the biggest food for thought going forward. The fee structure, so term-based discount or term-based memberships offer discounts to those who can pay up front, but it does create an inequity for those who might not be able to pay up front regardless of whether there's a subsidy there or not. Frequent users, definitely a term-based membership is the way to go. The subsidy doesn't give them as much if they are trying to come on a one-off basis or even do something like a 10 punch pass, because our fee structure suggests that the more you pay, the further discount you get. We've certainly had a few administrative challenges that we continue to work through, but that's just stuff we're doing in the background, but it is a component of our evaluation as we move along. And certainly we are preparing for the reapplication process. Sarah and I will be working very closely together around how to start getting the word out as to when people can reapply, what the reapplication process is, reminding them that the actual application is different, and a host of different things in preparation for that expiry of May 31st, so that people, the goal is to make sure that they have continuity of access to service so that there's not a delay in them being able to access a subsidy to continue to come to our facilities. There's a bit of information on the side as to what our next steps are, but largely, really my biggest point in that would be to let you know that we have intentions of coming back at the June meeting to let you know how the reapplication process went, where we're at with the numbers of people in the system, and just if there's any learnings or suggestions on adjustments to the policy going forward. And that is it.
Great. Okay, questions, Director Druckmann?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I thought we had a really good conversation last fall, I guess it was last summer, fall. And I think Director Page brought up some of the points that stuck best in my mind about social benefit versus how much money could this be. And I really appreciate, like, we budgeted what might have sounded like a big number, but we're using 19% of it. So if you had 136,000 and say instead of $100 adult, 150 youth, we said 200, 300, we had those conversations. That would be more than $250,000, big number. It's not such a big number. Although we haven't got a full year's data, we don't know what the re-enrollment will be, but I think starting to see the trend of people running out of money and losing that social benefit and benefit to all of us, I would like to see when you come back with the recommendation of maybe we do double it. We go to 200 and 300, but we do it on a 6-month interval. Because I think we will find that some people who love to walk and be outside, today's the day, will do that. But people who don't walk for the entire winter because of fear of fall, injury, whatever, they got little kids, you can't push the stroller and hold the toddler's hand and negotiate the whatever, the ice and snow. Indoor recreation for the 3-month pass makes a lot of sense. So if we were to consider doubling the amount, but say it's a 6-month allocation. So a family might say, well, let's get 6 months or 3 months into the winter so we can be safe, or the senior or whoever with mobility challenges in winter. And then they might say in the summer, let's do a 3-month pass or target programming because the kids want to stay engaged and meet other kids or whatever during the summer, during the school break. So 2 times the amount, but on 6-month intervals, so that someone doesn't take the full $200 up front, use it against one pass, and never come back. Because I think the conversation, everybody can remember, the what if people run out of money, and can we afford it? Well, I think we can afford it in terms of the social benefit. And we're already seeing people run out of money with a part-year program.
Noted. Great. Director Papa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't know if I fully understood what Manager Sheriff was saying, that with the subsidy and it'll be charged back to Rec 8 service. I think I understood that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the question would be is if people from the northern portion of Area H decide to take advantage of this subsidy, not very likely, but if they do, how will that happen?
So through the chair, so it would, right now, we have the ability to track where that person is coming from. So we don't expect that, but we will bring it forward if we see that there's a trend that it's happening. But so, for example, Walter, in Area H North, which is really Rec 6, which is Silverton, New Denver, and the northern portion of Area H. Just so you know, in that recreation service, we actually have a fitness facility in that area. At the moment, this doesn't apply to that particular service because the admission into that service is already very minimal. It's more of a convenience fee. So it doesn't apply in that case. But if that structure of fees and charges up there changes as we move forward and start understanding that better and getting a little bit more mature in that operation, then this policy could apply. And then, yes, maybe we will start seeing it. But at the moment, we have not budgeted for this type of an expenditure in Rec City.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
Thanks, Director Papa. Director Page.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the comments. Part of where, listening to the stories and working front counter customer service is a day-to-day. I understand the challenges and the difficulty there. I don't, I'm okay with going another 6 months and figuring out extra budgets. That's a transitionary step. But I don't want to romanticize that it's, always a single mother with kids trying to wrangle things. Like what I'm hearing is there are people with, this is life-changing, life-defining, this is their day-to-day. And I would want to see even just push us at least to put a motion that covered these 35 people, or the people that are expiring, or create the ability until we get to the other checkpoints to just cover the amount of subsidization and re-top them up and keep track of it and see where the numbers land, because as we're saying, the numbers are not landing in these really big domains. So let's just make sure we're being inclusive and people have access to the facility.
Tricia?
So through the chair, we are doing that already. And it's actually been great to have the opportunity to speak directly to the people who, it's relying on them to reach out to us to say, hey, this isn't working for me. And so of the 4 people that we have worked with, as we have learned more about what they have easy access to say, this is what we're trying to work, this is the framework we're trying to work within. Is there something within this that is going on for you that you can help me understand? And then we've been able to add that extra subsidy to those people. We don't just add it because they have run out. Okay. So it is involving a bit of a conversation right now. I think the discussion potentially in June could be that those people who are verified under those reasons that we're already adding that extra subsidy to, is that if the amount changes, or at least at minimum be able to say, if you're giving us this information, we will automatically give you the full year's value of subsidy on your account. For some people, depending on the value, it still may not be enough. I could do some math to tell you how people are using it today based on the value that they have on their account. I could do some math there. And it's difficult until we actually almost have a full year to really gauge what's going to be best. But with the goal of ensuring that this is going to the right people, I think we can still work within a framework that is satisfying what you're suggesting and considers what Director Jackman has put forward as well for consideration. So we're with you in trying to figure out how to not disrupt opportunity for people within the framework that we have. Paula, you good?
No, I'm good then. Yeah.
Director Hanegraaff.
Yeah, I guess this is anecdotal, but what isn't on some level. I know in my experience that, the people on permanent disability are there for a reason, and it's quite often a physical reason where the pool in particular is very therapeutic for them. and a big part of their wellness and healing. The other part, quite honestly, is the social aspect of being at the complex and interacting rather than isolating at home. So I think however we can support the community so that they can maximize their opportunities, I think we should be doing that for the good of everyone. Yeah.
Great. Not seeing any other questions, so thank you, Tricia. Appreciate it. We look forward to talking in June more about it. And moving on to 7.2, programming update, All Recreation Committee by Tia. I see you online. And just want to pause for 1 sec. Alana, did you catch that Director Hewitt came in?
And Director David.
Oh, and Director David. Oh, I didn't catch him. Director Hewitt, I got at 9:13. Didn't get Director David up?
Nope, I just noticed Director David up when I went off the presentation.
Okay. Great. Did you catch those?
David off 9:15. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Over to you, Tia.
Through the chair. Good morning, everybody. Okay, so not so many charts this time around, but I do have an update on some of the larger projects and initiatives that the programming team's been working on for 2025. Some of these you likely are already very familiar with, as they're continuations from 2024. But these are updates that you'll probably get throughout each of the All-Rec meetings on how each of these projects are progressing. The programming team is actually in 2025 operating under 5 programming goals that we've set for 2025 to keep that progress needle moving, but also in the right direction and with the right lens as we make decisions through with each of these projects. And so the 5 programming goals are accessibility to services, which includes things like financial accessibility, inclusive services, everything in line with what Tricia's been working on in her life, her work life, staff development, all those things. Customer service is the second goal, and that is not only the external customer service that we see with our clients, but also the internal service that we support our staff in, and making sure that everyone feels like everyone can move forward with their life and with their work life and get the things that they need done. And so that's trying to support that excellence in service delivery. Standardization is the third goal, and that's how we, refining continually our frameworks of consistent delivery, consistent processes, regional processes that each of the facilities undertake in order to provide that consistent service. We've got the fourth one, which is community connections. And this is helping improve visibility, communication, support, relationship building with the public and community groups, something that that we all see is very important. And the fifth one is fiscal responsibility. This one's probably a no-brainer considering it's part of one of the larger RDCK goals. And this is just the costing and budget practices that we have, being cost effective in our programming, benefits driven, making sure that our service delivery, everything kind of falls under that fiscal responsibility umbrella. So with those 5 in mind, I'm going to share with you the larger projects that we're working on. We're working with some smaller ones, of course, as they go throughout the year, but the larger ones, I'll start with the funded training. So this is the funded training, no cost training. This is that program that we launched in 2023. So you've seen this in previous reports, and we've talked about the needs for the funded training program. And to keep it in alignment with the work being done with access and inclusion, as well as our continuous need to fill our operational gaps, especially in some facilities more than others, we've narrowed down our priorities to 2, which is ensuring that the applicant has a financial barrier, but also that our operational gaps are filled. So helping fund people through these training programs need to fit both of these criteria in order for us to accept them into the program, which is a little bit tighter than what we were doing before in our previous, to just try and get the numbers through and hope that, a certain percentage of them stick. Staff is working on this year a smoother, more objective, transparent application process and how we advertise from it, and our award process and how we choose the individuals to be more objective. And with this, we will keep you updated as to how many we are starting to put through in each year with the program, and what our success and uptake rate is for this program. I'm not sure whether or not we want to pause after every project area, or if you just want me to do the whole thing at once.
We can pause. I do have one question from Director Vandenberg already.
Great, thank you, Tia. I could have waited till the end, but that's my first question is regarding your programming goals. Those are they're not prioritized, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Great. Great question. Nice and concise. Okay, we are moving on. Back over to you, Tia.
Fantastic, thanks. Okay, so the next project goal that we're working on is space allocation. This also is not new news. However, we were sidetracked with other priorities in late 2024 that didn't allow the work that we wanted to see done on space allocation. So now, as we are in 2025, we're seeing obviously the need rise again. And so we are doing work on this. The work with the Pioneer Arena closing, being able to having to put creative solutions in place as we drop down to one sheet of ice in Castlegar, working with all the different user groups, this allocation piece becomes even more and more important. We've got busy spaces in the pool, especially in Nelson. And so the work that we're doing this year, obviously, is going to work on adjusting those procedure timelines. This is something that I know the Nelson Commission has had people and user groups come forward to talk more about. So this is what we're going to be addressing, as well as providing those definitions for public space and what our minimum public space commitment is, so that it's not only the user groups that are being served with this allocation piece, is that the public also has that space that they can continue to use the facility, as well as further research on how to better maximize our spaces and sharing of the rental space and the public space, because there are lots of opportunities for creativity to ensure that people and the public and the user groups can share the space. So that is space allocation. Any questions?
Yeah, Director Jackman.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. And this is maybe localized to Creston, maybe it's larger. I had a community champion, very active person in the community on a few different fronts, concerned about soccer space allocation in Creston. I said, well, staff, take some time to work this out. We went back and forth, probably have 8 or 10 emails. And finally they said, oh, it's all good. It's football and soccer is some conflict. Raised the question, we always see indoor space allocation challenges, ice, aquatics. My understanding was outdoor is not so bad. In general, baseball has come up where they want big tournament size, for teams that wants to play. But are we under much of a crunch for outdoor space allocation? I thought we had adequate access to school playing fields. Is that an issue, or was this kind of an unusual one-off that I saw all this email activity around?
I'll push this over to Craig.
Yeah, through the chair, hope you can hear me. We do follow the allocation procedures for field. We've done it for a couple of years now in Creston since the policy was implemented. We did see an overlap or a request. The flag football group has grown, and primetime soccer field use in Creston, even though it's large, we're trying to direct the users into shared use and creative shared use, as Tia pointed out, including allocating different portions of the field for shared use, and they haven't quite gotten to that point where they're accepting of that model or that map. So we had a bit of a conflict with the flag football group and the soccer group. And the other thing that happened was the soccer group changed a number of their volunteers and their personnel and executive, and so they weren't sure of the allocation process, and so they were a little bit anxious about the fact that we hadn't quite worked out the conflict prior to them promoting their schedule, but we were following our procedures according to the deadlines and the dates that we had put in there. So I think that was a little bit of early angst built into new people coming in and additional pressure from a new group, but we've worked that out, as Director Jackman pointed out.
So through the chair, and so there was another question from Director Jackman, and that was about this maximum use, like this. We are going to host one tournament a year, and we need more fields. This, I think you're going to see, whether that be around arenas, whether that be around fields. It's like saying there's one time a year and we need a parking lot of 2,000.
Yeah.
Do you build the parking lot of 2,000? So this is this funny space. Preston in particular, like in Crescent area in particular, Creston's a little bit isolated, but in Nelson and Castlegar, this is really where I see in this corridor, there has to be cooperation there. You cannot build Surrey athletic parks in Nelson and Castlegar. You need to use the resources you have available in both communities and even in Trail. So like in order to do those, it doesn't mean that those kinds of things can't happen. It's that we can't get around the fact that it's not Surrey Athletic Park. Quite honestly, I don't see how we could ever do that effectively or efficiently with our size of population. So those are going to be those places where I really do believe over the next 20 decade and 20 years beyond that, you really do have to start. That's one of the purposes of this commission, this committee, is to start having those conversations because there is maybe economic benefit, but somehow we have to get people onto the page that it's using. There are great facilities at between Millennium, Campbell Field, which isn't developed, here at Lakeside Park. Those kinds of things, we need to think a little more broadly about that.
Thanks, Joe. Great. Any other questions on space allocation? Not seeing any. Over to you, Tia.
Thank you. All right, data collection and analysis is the next one. And so this is an ongoing project that started in the last half of 2024. And we identified different data areas that we are going to start to provide consistent methodologies on how we collect the data. So that's everything from how it's inputted into the system from a front desk perspective or programming perspective to how we actually, what reports we use to collect and to sift through the data, analyze it, and report on it, not just to these committees and commissions, but also to our internal staff and other agencies that we have relationships with. And this year, we are adding three areas of data collection processes. Two is the Leisure Access Program, which has already started, as you've seen, as well as program feedback and comment cards, just to gain an understanding of how we can do this in a more efficient manner using manual methods of keeping that data is very time consuming and not efficient of staff time use. So we will be working with IT to figure out ways that we can start to collect this information and sort through this in a more digital space. And the third one is personal services. This one's not a large reach for us to do because it's not too much different from the registered programs and included with admission programs. And when I mean personal services, this is just our personal training and some of our private swim lessons that we do, and collecting that data and being able to work with it and analyze it, use that for evaluating purposes and making better decisions in the future. Any questions?
Yeah, Director Noel.
Great, thank you. Yeah, no, I wasn't sure if it was Vandenberg first, so there we go. Hi, through the chair, I'd like to ask in regard to feedback, is there room for the ICE users to provide feedback vis-a-vis the time in which the ice is removed from the main arena in Nelson?
Joe?
Well, when we get into my report, I'm going to draw, well, I'm not actually trying to do that, but I think I'm trying to set up that conversation for around commission tables. That is your primary control on costs, is setting your service level. So you, as a governance body at Nelson and District and at Castlegar and Creston and the Valley and the Rec 6, even for the cusp around its facilities, although we don't run those, you need to balance that out. No, user group should not be dictating your schedule, because I can clearly tell you that August and September, your usage rate is incredibly low when you put in your ice at that time, which is the most expensive time of year for you to have the ice in, for example. But that's not saying that you shouldn't do it. It's just that you need to get clear why you are doing it, and it should not be at the whim of a user group, because you're talking about spending more taxation dollars on that. And having gone through budget process this year, I think that there are serious conversations that need to take place around it. It's something which is clearly one of the primary pieces for governance committees is to set those scopes of service, and then to understand what those scopes of service mean. Because if you want accurate budgeting, accurate costing, control of costs, those things have to be very clear.
Thanks, Chair Watson, and welcome back, Director Weatherhead. I didn't even notice, so you're good? We're good to continue? Great, okay. Over to Director Vandenberg.
Is there a supplemental?
Oh, sorry, Director Dooley, you have a supplemental? Go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And sometimes I think through this feedback process, it may be difficult to assess the actual demand that would be for the ice till April 15th. I recognize that. My question, just to be clear, was how it seems like we are attempting to have we hired a communications person. We are supposedly outreaching to our community, and I wanted to ensure that in that reaching out to the community that we touched base with those users that are very supportive of our facilities, and that there's a way in which they feel that there's a voice to, that it's not just a random, oh, we're closing on March 31st or whatever, that we're actually trying to hear from our users. So that was the intention of that. And there's more to come. I'll certainly be talking at Rec 5, more about that. This is more in general terms for the entire Rec, RDCK Rec service. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Noel. Craig, I see that you put your hand up. You have something to say?
Yeah, through the chair, we do that formally every year through the allocation process, where we engage with the users and ask them what their demand is for the ice, and we give them a general: the ice is going in this date, the ice is going out this date, and anything additional to that, if they put in a request for, because right now the ice at the NDCEC is scheduled to come out April 10th, but if someone were to say we want to have an additional week, we would consider that, and certainly given that allocation happens in the summer, we could come back to the commission and say, we need to keep the ice in for an additional week for this group who wants to use it for this function. And then we would add that to potentially the budget. But there is that process for gauging the demand from the user groups every year during the allocation.
Thanks, Craig. You good, Director Noel? Good. Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you. Two questions. The first one will stack on Director Newell's question around program feedback consent cards that TIA has laid out that will be scheduled to start in 2025. Can we apply some sort of an action date to that? To me, customer service feedback is the number one priority, and the ability in which people understand how they can feedback is critical. So scheduled in 2025 is well, there's only 9 months left, sort of thing, right? So what are we expected to see something by the end of second quarter in this regard?
Tia or anyone else wants to answer? Do you have a date for when you plan on starting?
Through the chair, I don't have an exact start date, but I do know that this is a multi-layered process that includes a lot of different avenues, whether it be program evaluation forms, comment cards, which we already have a process for, that we probably go through some type of refinement in creating a digital process for us to be able to work with the data that does come in, and also not just to collect the cards to collect them, but also to read them and have a response to the people that have comments about the facility, about our services, and have questions or any of those things. We've also got other ways that we receive feedback as well, and so schedule will start in 2025. Yes, I can definitely give you a date that in Q2, which is basically now, we will schedule to start work. I don't have an end date at this time. Our project outline hasn't been defined yet. So that will, once that project outline gets defined, I will actually be able to tell you probably at the next all-rec meeting a better timeline once we have that project outline figured out.
Great. Thank you through the chair. And if I may continue, and thank you, Tia, for that. I'm looking forward to it because I do believe that our customers are number one. My question to do with the funded training. So specifically in Creston, where are we at in our levels around the pool for staff? Do we still have openings? Are you still looking to get more people into the lifeguard program and so on? Where are we at?
Yeah.
Well, it looks like Craig has unmuted himself because he might have something to say on this matter.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, I don't have data for Director Vandenberg. I do know that I have been told that we have enough staff to increase service levels. We were talking with the commission at budget time, the committee at budget time about doing that. But the recruiting for aquatics is always ongoing, and I think that 2025 for the staff training initiative is still going to be a good year to keep that moving, to ensure that we have consistent staff recruiting, and then we, as Tia pointed out, we can evaluate the performance of that. But right now, staffing levels in Creston are getting to a good level, and it is attributed to the subsidy that we provided through the staff training.
So a good level is a good answer. I would like to know what opportunity there is, so I can go out in the community and let people know.
Through the chair, I believe we had talked about expanding the service hours and the Creston Pool around springtime. So I think we're right in that window. And I think that given that budget was approved, we can start to move in that direction and get the promotions out there as well.
Great, thank you.
Great. You good, Director Vandenberg? Good. Okay, over to you, Tia. Not seeing anyone else.
Great. Sorry, I will just add just to Craig's comment. Pools do have a very high turnover rate, and so succession planning is very important as part of this. So we will likely see that come fall, we will probably lose more staff, and we'll have to gain more staff. And so it's an ongoing cycle for us. So while we have stable levels right now, we're still always in a process. Obviously, that funded spots will go to facilities and communities that need staffing the most. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, moving on to you.
Okay, so next is the program costing analysis. So this is not a necessarily something new, but it is something that we are sort of going more in depth to. We're doing a reevaluation of our program costing. With the work that you'll hear later in this meeting on Joe's report, talking about the different fees and fee structures. We also will be going in reevaluating our costing methods and analysis and formulas that we use to create the fees that we charge, so that we are accurate in the revenue that comes in, and we can also do better budgeting, and that we are hitting the numbers that we need to for the fees and charges through the fees and charges policy. So this is just an update to let you know that we are opening this back up again in 2025 to ensure that what we're doing is on par and accurate for how we charge for programs and services.
Okay, any questions? You can continue.
Fantastic. Okay, so the last one I have here is the statutory holiday alignment. So Tricia had spoken about this in the October All-Rec meeting around, just to give you some information around how stat holidays are handled in the RDCK, both similarly and different across the facilities. And that was kind of the main emphasis of her report, is to identify that we are not the same in every facility. And staff was asked to bring back a report around our plan for alignment across the facilities. And so this is me speaking to that. So just on a little bit of a recap of what is currently happening in every facility, is that our operational hours during stat holidays is the same in each facility. Right now, every facility is open from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. On Family Day, Good Friday, Thanksgiving, Remembrance Day, and Boxing Day. Budgets in 2025 reflect that we are going to be open on these days with general admission, with charging general admission. Unless there was a sponsor that has come forward that moving in our community services sponsorship policy, we're now trying to implement proper costing methods and what we charge the sponsor in order for us to be able to recoup our costs on those stat holidays. So going forward, we will continue to charge general admission during our stat holidays unless that a sponsor does come forward. We are going forward developing a program with the community services sponsorship policy to let potential sponsors know what sponsorship opportunities are available and give them that opportunity. What we will see though is that in different communities, we're going to have different sponsors come up that want to sponsor different holidays. And where reasonable, we will try to encourage that sponsor to, sponsor similar activities in all three facilities. But as an example, this year, we didn't see that necessarily. Over Family Day, we did have a sponsor come forward that does business in both Nelson and Castlegar, and was very willing to provide sponsorship for Family Day for those two communities, but not Creston. And while Creston had historical funding through BCRPA, like a provincial Family Day, like government funding, it was no longer available. And so we will see in the future that there will be inconsistencies with sponsorship, but with a better program in place with the community services sponsorship policy, we will hopefully be able to have better communication with the communities, so that we may be able to receive, even if they are different sponsors, to have sponsorship for different for the same stat holidays. So I guess basically where we stand is sponsorship is going to look different in each facility, but we will be working towards alignment as we move forward. And I don't know if Tricia would like to add anything to that.
Yep, Tricia. So through the chair, I just want to use Family Day as a bit of an example. So what Tia is saying in that report is that Family Day historically, since the day it basically became a statutory holiday, free opportunities for service have been a thing. And so historically, it's an example of where the community may have an expectation that there is free admission to something on that day. What this is saying is that in order to create alignment, and because that provincial funding that used to exist no longer exists, if there is no sponsor, the continuity across the district would be that every statutory holiday, the baseline is that general admission would be charged. And so within our budgets, as Tia mentioned, the budgets reflect regular operating costs and anticipated admission on those statutory holidays that were operational. The sponsorship piece, I'm going to just park on the side until we get into the sponsorship till the next report. But the concept being is that the alignment component is been somewhat driven by the sponsorship issue. But really, we wanted you to be very clearly aware as to what we're aligning based on budget, operations, the days that were actually operational, and then the sponsorship piece, should it come forward, will influence some component of that.
Good. Yeah, makes sense. Great. Okay, I've got a couple questions here. So Director Newell.
Thanks. That almost may have answered my question, but I'll just pose it through the chair to staff. On a statutory holiday that we are open, do we experience greater revenue than normal? And I don't mean someone with a monthly pass coming in on that extra day, but rather revenue from day payers coming in.
Yep, Tricia. Through the chair, no to Director Newell. And if you want to hold that thought, there is some information in the next presentation that I can share with you that you will see that speaks a little bit to that. Good?
Director Lockwood.
Thank you. And a question through the chair is, I understand that we're talking the bigger facilities and the statutory holidays don't affect the Salmo Pool, but what about the Salmo Fitness Center? Does the statutory holidays affect that, and is it open on those days? I've just had some questions around it, so I just want to be clear in my answer.
Through the chair. Oh, sorry.
Yep. No, go for it, Tia, if you've got the answer.
At this time, Salmo is not open during statutory holidays.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Davidoff.
Yeah, and I understand that we are going to be discussing sponsorship later, but Area I started supporting Family Day activities with a grant right, for as long as I can remember. And then Area J joined in to support. These are the busiest days, some of the busiest days at our complex with this support. So I can wait till the sponsorship report, but is there a can we just continue doing what we're doing and not be a concern? I know it's up to every other area, but to decide if they want to do this. But can we just keep doing what we've been doing for a very long time?
I will let Tricia answer that in her next report because it will totally be covered.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Director Davidoff. Any other questions on this? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Tia.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to 7.3, and we're going to continue for at least another 10 minutes or so before we take a break. Community Services Sponsorship Policy Framework. I believe you have a presentation.
I do. Joe's just managing our IT needs at the moment.
1 second, everyone.
Through the chair, and to everybody on the right-hand side of the room. Unfortunately, something's gone wrong and I can't it won't reconnect to this.
You gotta disconnect those TVs.
Sorry, just a week. I didn't know that. I didn't know that trick.
Do we want to take a 10-minute? Okay, for those online, because we have to fix TV stuff, we're going to take our 10-minute break right now. So we will come back at 10:30. Okay, or 10:28. Thanks.
Technology will make your
10:28 or half.
You would hope.
Look, you heard that. I've heard that for 30,000 dollars.
I bet.
Mom lost her list. So
right, so it is 1 minute to go, and then we will get started.
And Alana, you noticed that Director or Chair Watson stepped out?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Jeopardy music.
I know, right? That everyone? I don't know, let me see. Anyone? Director Popoff, Director Weatherhead, Director Tannery, are you on?
Yes, I am, Maria.
Okay, great. Great.
I'm also here.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I think we got everyone. Okay, so we're moving on to 7.3, over to Tricia with Community Services Sponsorship Policy Framework. Alicia, the presentation.
I do. I trust everyone can see it. So this is just walking through the report that you have in front of you. So back in October, we talked a little bit about bringing forward a sponsorship framework to this meeting for consideration. So the principles that we have used to guide the framework are things like putting this together to support our access and inclusion initiatives, making sure we have some form of standardized framework for corporate and nonprofit sponsorship opportunities to supplement funding where a sponsor comes forward for already approved RDCK board initiatives such as facilities, budgets, programs, and services. Definitely to ensure we have alignment of potential sponsors with our mission, vision, values, and priorities, and to develop relationships with organizations looking to support community initiatives. This policy specifically speaks to community services, events, special projects, programs, and services. It's not necessarily meant to apply to anything else, just to make sure that the scope is really clear, and we've purposely made it very narrow. So some of the existing challenges that we have to date, so this dealing with sponsorships is not totally new. Some areas of the district have had more success with this than others. However, trying to standardize this across the district became important, and also putting a bit of a box around it so that it was clear what we were working within, and so that the board understood how this works within the community services environment. So to date, we have definitely been reactionary versus proactive in the sponsorships that have come forward. It's not necessarily a planned approach in how sponsorships have come to be to this point in time. There's a lack of standardization and formality in how we deal with potential sponsors. Trying to ensure that there's equal opportunity for any business or organization that wants to sponsor something within community services has that opportunity and knows we're open for business. Does not technically exist today. It's a bit more word of mouth, or they've done it before in the past and reach out to us, has kind of been the approach to date. And we have not had a consistent valuation framework to identify what's the value that should be charged to the sponsor, and to what degree are we trying to cover costs and in what areas. And it's also just the complexity of it. It takes a lot of work to manage some of these sponsor opportunities, and especially to do them well, and to be able to represent the RDCK properly, and certainly to represent the sponsoring organization properly. So just for clarity, a sponsorship policy could encompass all kinds of things. And for everyone's knowledge, the things that this policy framework does not include would be things like the naming rights of a new park or a facility that got built. It's not talking about advertising rights. So if somebody wants to put their logo across one of our ice resurfacers. That is not part of this policy. And anything to do with in-kind contributions is not part of this policy. Anything within those would have a different type of agreement, would go through a different process, and would actually require its own framework unto itself. So to keep this simple, we've removed those items, but are just flagging them in case someone says, hey, what about this? It's clear that it's not actually in this policy. So what it does apply to is our facility programs and services operated, does not apply to, are things that are operated by another organization within our facility. So I think a good example, and Craig can correct me if I'm wrong, might be, say, one of the junior teams that are soliciting sponsors and how they have advertising within our facilities. That would fall under a separate agreement with that organization, and the rules of engagement in how sponsors are then identified within our facility would actually be in that agreement with that organization. Correct,
Through the chair, I'll just, those organizations have a formal agreement with the RDCK board that allows them to solicit sponsorship, collect revenue, and they share that with us. Those are all encapsulated in separate agreements.
Thank you. And so this policy also does not apply, the framework doesn't apply to things like philanthropic contribution, gifts, or donations, grants obtained from other levels of government, or RDCK sponsorship of external projects. So this next 3 slides is actually, if you took the framework that's provided to you as an appendix in your agenda, and actually highlight some of the main components within each of the headings. So there's a policy statement that basically talks about the overarching philosophies and guiding principles of what the policy aims to achieve. Requirements, so things like that sponsors have to have alignment with the values of the regional district, be mutually beneficial in relationship both to us and to the organization, that we are expected to conduct our business in a transparent process, and that there's solid documentation practices in the background as to what the sponsorship involves and how it's going to be executed, depending on whatever it is being sponsored. So in the solicitation component, the expectation here is that it does give staff some ability to directly solicit sponsorships, as long as there's actually an active communication strategy in place that says, hey, community, we're open for business to do sponsorships, and this is the type of things we're looking for. But if we say, hey, we don't have a sponsor for Family Day, and we know that we're somebody last year that said they were interested in doing this again with us, that if no one came forward, we could then directly go out and call that agency and see if they're interested in sponsoring something with us. But in the background, there would be some form of communication strategy, whether it's through chambers of commerce, whether it's through our advertising efforts that our communication staff use already to say, hey, this is what we can do, this is our program, reach out to us if you're interested. But we wouldn't, without that, we wouldn't go directly knocking door to door seeking sponsorship. So valuation, I'm going to get into in a little bit more detail a little later, but the valuation component right now has largely been drafted on 3 components. So one is the cost of facilities, the cost of staff, the cost of any supplies related to the service if there was such a thing, an administrative cost for managing the actual sponsorship engagement, and then any taxes if they're applicable. So that's the major components of the valuation piece. So in the criteria section, to me, this is where it just helps everybody remember that we have to be very careful when we're actually soliciting or dealing with sponsorships, that we are a local government. We do have responsibilities to ensure that we are doing things correctly. So things like making sure advertising standards are applied, that there's no personal benefit to anybody within the regional district as an employee, a volunteer, or official, making sure that we remain in control of all our services, programs, events, or any advertising efforts, that doesn't get turned over to a sponsor, that we manage all of those details, that there's no preferential treatment of a sponsor outside of the sponsor agreement, trying to think of any good example of that might be, what that might be, but I'm sure many of you could probably think of where that could be a concern, where we want to make sure that the relationships always remain separate and clear and transparent. So the restrictions, I believe, is also one of the other key components of having a framework in place, is where and when we have the right to refuse sponsorship. So certainly if there's a contradiction in any of our bylaws or policies that we have, we want the ability to refuse that sponsorship. If it could reflect negatively on the RDCK in any way, if there's a real or potential conflict of interest, if there's not an alignment with the intended audience, you know, maybe an example might be, I don't know, a local brewery wants to sponsor a free swim that's obviously targeted towards youth. We would probably say that's not a good idea. If there's a dispute with an organization that we should be aware of, we certainly don't want to be branded with that organization as a sponsor. If they promote, sell, or produce products that could negatively impact our image. If there's a sponsor that promotes religious, political, or other potentially divisive messages, we certainly don't want to entertain that. And if there's images or messages that are discriminatory, derogatory, thank you, harmful, or intolerant of any specific group or individual. And we would just want to make sure, like through people like Sarah, that any of the advertising that is done is approved messaging through the regional district. So the fund allocation, so any funds received from sponsorship would go directly back to the service that was benefiting. So for example, if a sponsor sponsored Family Day in Castlegar and Nelson, that sponsorship would be divided between those two services, and that revenue would go into those respective services as per however we divided that up with the sponsor. And then through the evaluation and reporting, obviously our goal is to make sure that we're constantly evaluating how well this is working, but obviously to report back to the board on an annual basis as to the success of the program or any challenges that we're facing, or obviously additions or changes to the framework that might be required. So some interesting information, just because I know many of you are aware that some of the sponsorship work has been done in the past. And so, of course, we no sooner talked about this in October with the committee to then all of a sudden within about a 7-week window received 4 different, completely different types of sponsorship opportunities that came to us. So when we look at this, one of the key considerations that I think is really important for everyone to understand is that at no point within adding this opportunity to our repertoire of services within community services is the expectation that we're adding additional staff to manage or support sponsorship objectives. We are simply trying to fit this in with work that we already do and trying to manage it in a way to ensure that it is manageable within existing work plans. The valuation component is also, I talked a little bit about it, but here it is in writing, the 5 main components that we currently have utilized to determine the valuation of a service. So we use commercial rates for space, in particular if it's a for-profit agency that is looking to sponsor something. If a nonprofit came forward, we would look to adult rates, and you'll see that in a different slide. Any additional staffing costs and associated overhead. So back to Tia's report, when we said these are the 5 statutory holidays that we have in the budget that we are planning to operate, it means that that budget has been approved at that service level. But the minute we go to add something where we're doing complimentary admission, where we have to bring in more staff to safely operate these buildings, it's that additional staff window that we're looking to cover, not the component that would have already been approved in a budget. If somebody said, hey, I really want to do New Year's Day, it's a statutory holiday, we're not operational, then this valuation changes dramatically. It is all staff, all costs related to opening those doors on that day that would have to factor in to the cost of that valuation. So it would be considerably higher than what this current valuation would suggest. So the 4 that came forward to us that actually allowed us to truth test. Can I come back to you then, or let you know? Okay, well, perfect, sorry.
You're good.
got squirrel. I got it. So in the four that came forward to us, gave us a chance to kind of truth test our draft. And we then sort of evaluated it and readjusted this 15 times, trying to figure out what made most sense. But we had an anonymous donation. This was actually in Creston, where they came forward and said, here's $500, offer free opportunities for people to come to the pool. And we said, well, that's not quite how this works. So we turned it around and said, well, here's what we can do with your $500 to make sure that it actually has the broadest public benefit without incurring additional staff time. So we managed that in one way. We had another sponsor come forward and say, hey, we're interested in doing all public skates in Castlegar specifically for the Christmas break. So we said, okay, well, how do we value that? And so we said, well, we're offering these anyways. What's the additional staff time that would be required? Any other additional cleanup or things that might go on to just know that these people were coming into the building? That valuation with that same criteria as above came in at $2,700, happily paid by the sponsor. And it was a great thing to see people come into the facility over the Christmas break for skating. Family Day was different again, where it was a statutory holiday, and they were interested in sponsoring 2 locations because they happened to do business in both Castlegar and Nelson. And so we looked at that and did the same valuation, just at statutory holiday rates of pay, and which of course factors into considerably higher staffing costs. And in this case, we divided that sponsorship valuation in half. So $3,300 went to Castlegar, $3,300 went to Nelson. And then there was another sponsor, this actually just happened in early March, where they said, hey, we're interested in doing a free swim. And they originally said, we want to do 12 to 2 on a Saturday. And we said, well, if you want to do that, that valuation changed to about $950 compared to the $615, because we changed the time to 2 to 4. And the reason for that is that if you come in between 12 and 2, we have to staff the building assuming that people that come in at 1:55 may stay longer. And so therefore we have to assume that they're going to be in the building longer. So once we explained that to them, they said, great, no problem. We'll do the latter 2 hours of the day. And the valuation came in at $615, and they were happy, and everybody went on their way. But it was those kinds of conversations that you needed to test the framework on, to help let people understand how and why the numbers came to be what they are. So I thought you might be interested in seeing, well, in the days that we haven't had free admission, what type of admission is coming across our desks, and what are the staffing costs within those facilities if we are just staffing it as a regular operating day. It just happens to be a statutory holiday. And you can see that, I'll just use Castlegar as an example. You can see that Good Friday, Thanksgiving, Remembrance Day, and Boxing Day are all within about, a couple $100 of each other across the staffing complement. If you get into Family Day, you can see that the staffing costs are about $1,000 more, because they would have had to increase the staffing complement to manage the anticipated number of people coming into the building. You can also see that when it was free, 334 people were in attendance versus, and I'm just going to use the top 3, you're in the 95 as low as 35, and this is people coming in under, so the people in the white columns are people paying, not necessarily people scanning, because what we just decided to use as our metric was going, if you have a pass, you probably didn't buy the pass thinking you really wanted to come on Thanksgiving. You probably bought the pass because you're a frequent user and you come regularly, versus others were going, no, I made a choice to come on this day and I'm paying admission, so just to keep it simple, we use that. Boxing Day is a little weird to look at in Castlegar, only because they had a sponsor for the swim only, so you can see the difference in the number of people that came through the door, purely because the swim was free on that day. And then if you kind of use the math across, you can see what sort of happens. So there's a similarities in all 3 facilities. When you look at Family Day, I then tried to say, okay, well, what happened when we got the revenue of $3,300 in Castlegar and Nelson and no funding coming in for Creston? And so you can see where obviously attendance is high. Nelson is almost double what the other facilities saw. the staffing complement in Nelson to manage their anticipated number is significantly higher than other facilities. That said, there also is some learning going on as to, well, how many do we really need? We staffed it this way, did we need this many? Castlegar and Creston had a lot more, I think, comfort in where they were at. I also don't think that that's far off for Nelson. I do think it's pretty close. But you can see that the valuation that said, okay, well, when we did the valuation in Family Day for Castlegar, we did exactly what we hoped to do. We covered those additional costs that we wanted to cover, and that's great. In Nelson, we didn't hit that mark. We actually went, because they had to staff the facility more, that mark became higher. So unfortunately, we didn't reach the $5,000 amount, but we did do better than some of the other days that we were open, not Boxing Day, but the other days it's comparable. So there still might have been some benefit there. And in Creston, unfortunately, the sponsor they anticipated didn't come through. And so that's how Creston landed, which is just the way it was. So I think that to me is really important information to see, because we could go the route of saying, well, if we know that Nelson's going to cost us this much money, we could do that and actually charge back up to the $5,000 amount for what the staffing expenses ended up being. I just don't have any idea, I have no pulse on what that would look like when I'm dealing with the same sponsor. I don't know what the conversation would be where, why am I paying $3,300 in Castlegar and $5,200 in Nelson? Might be a conversation for this group. My little clicker's not working.
Kicked out on one.
Oh, did it? Did we lose people?
No, just it's there, it's just not a project.
People look frozen though.
On that side.
Oh. Got it. Oh, we're here. Let me do this.
IT Joe is there.
Wow.
Well, that's because I see you both, one with each eye and one.
Okay, so that actually is my last slide.
I was like, I think it's questions.
Sorry, my apologies. That's my last slide. So
No problem. Before we go to the thing, we wanted to follow up with Director David's questions and make sure it's clear. So is it still available for area directors who historically sponsored some of those to still do that?
Yes, so through the chair to Director Davidoff, yes, that option would still be there, just the valuation would look different than maybe what you had seen historically.
Great. Director Davidoff, do you need to follow up on that before we go on to our list?
I think that's pretty clear. As long as we're not in any violation of any policy, RDCK policy for doing that, that's what my question and concern was, and I think we'll just continue doing things like we have done. We don't need to change anything. Is that correct through the chair, to Trish?
That's what I'm hearing.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, Director Druckmann.
Thanks. To the chair, I want to touch on 2 points. And the first one, if staff says nothing about it, that's fine, but I have to say it again. Naming rights isn't part of the policy, as you say in your presentation, but there it is, section 11, naming rights. Should we wish to sell naming rights, et cetera, et cetera. Naming rights are built upon prominence, whether it's corporate or individual. Prominence could be, say there's a pastor in town who I think has prominence due to his individual kindness and generosity and work he does, and every community has that kind of person. Prominence is also perhaps more often built through positions of privilege, and I just fundamentally reject naming rights. I want to see a name of a prominent corporation or person on a bench, let alone a building, arena, part of a facility. It is wrong. I would rather we say naming the RDCK is not selling or offering naming rights, period, under section 11. Because what this says is, hey, you can start a negotiation and tie our staff up to see how you get your name and become the whatever. Naming rights should be blunt. And don't expect a response today, but it is fundamentally wrong. There are people who will always feel excluded, or that's a barrier for whatever historical, personal reason, the family that owns half the rentals in the town. Whatever the reason, that's wrong. Humble opinion. The challenges on valuation, I love the way you've covered it because of the complexity. And in recognizing the complexity, I'd rather that it be a really blunt statement here, because you're trying to recover incremental costs or things that are not originally covered in a budget. But we know our budgets also bury huge percentages of all costs because we target recovery of a percentage of operational, whereas there's massive capital costs, debt, etc. I'd rather somewhere in here under valuation, you just have a lead-off statement. Actual facility, operational and capital costs, if viewed as an average daily cost for specific areas within a facility, are far greater than the revenues derived from fees and charges. This is a result of understanding the social benefit of recreation. Sponsorship valuations, based on the criteria below, do not fully cover actual costs, but are appreciated as an offset to fees and charges, which are normally paid by users. So if we're recording this, great. If we're not recording this, I'll email it. We need to say that because I feel like Trish is in a position of having to justify why is it more. The one analysis here, there's $6,600 for skating and swimming. That's less than a third of the actual cost. I did that, well, if that was for a day of skating and swimming and looked at the cost per year, which Joe gave us all the numbers later, and you might think it was $2 million a year to operate the pool and the ice, but it's not. It's $7.5 million a year. So the $2 million calculation, the sponsor thinks they cover the cost, they're like less than a third of the cost. So we need blunt statements up front to say, we appreciate your offset, but you are not paying the way. So however that could simplify staff negotiations down the road, I think we need to make those blunt statements. Yep, we appreciate your input. Do not pretend you're paying for skating or swimming for this day, because you are not. Taxpayers are. Because of social benefit.
Noted. Okay, great. You good?
Yeah. There's a pedestal for the naming rights. I was just on a soapbox, which is temporary, and you guys can kick it out from under me at any time you wish.
Great. We're moving on. Director Cunningham.
We're doing okay. No, I'm kidding. I understand your position, and I'm not sure I always agree with it. And for example, City Nelson has bench being down there in the park and stuff like that. And I see no difficulty with our bench being named in memoriam of a grandparent or something like that. So much. However, I have, through the chair, I have two questions, or possibly. One, first to know, on holidays, like the longer holidays, like Christmas and Easter and so forth, we get visitors into town, and they use our facilities, and that creates an impact that certainly isn't, because they're not the normal users. And I'm not suggesting we give them any kind of a price break. As a matter of fact, they'll probably charge them triple because they're probably unwashed. No. Right. I'm sorry, I'm being sarcastic. The fact is though, but I think there's something that we should know when we do these kinds of things, that these are not our regular people who are coming on a special day. These are special people who just wouldn't be here at other times. Just a note, but my real question is with regards to, is swimming pools. The Selma pool, for example, is closing early, and it doesn't have we used to get sponsorship from the schools to pay for swimming lessons. So we were open 6 weeks earlier in the spring. With regards to the school budgets and stuff like that, the monies are gone. And we don't have sponsorship for those things. I was curious, would it be possible, for example, to go to a local logging company and say, how would you like to sponsor the last week when we're fairly close to coming over the Boxing Day holiday? Because in some, partially because of staffing, so that's a consideration. But how would you like to sponsor the last week before coming up to the holiday for the swimming pool to be an entire cost? Very significant, but I think I know a lot of companies that might be interested in doing that kind of thing. So that's the question. That's the question. Could we do that? Could we extend the season one way or the other by means of a sponsorship for things like pools? This is different than
So through the chair, so one thing I probably skipped over a little bit is that the concept of reacting versus proacting, we, once approved, we would go and build a whole program around this policy. And if you can envision things like, we may be able to say, we are looking for sponsorship that might do on a monthly basis, over holidays, on statutory holidays, and target specific things. Because if one of our objectives is around access and inclusion, we want to be able to spread it out. We want to be able to say, boy, we've already got enough sponsors over the Christmas break in Nelson that we want to be able to say, are you interested in maybe doing Family Day? Are you interested in doing something in the fall instead? When it comes to Salmo, it's a unique situation because the operation is a little bit different. And I would say that once this first part gets more solidified and programmed, I think we could open that up to some unique opportunities in Salmo, building off of the same framework. I just think it's, for me, I'd have to give some time to think about it more thoroughly, but I'm not closing the door on it at all. I think it's more just we need to build it out more once the framework's approved.
Thank you, supplementary, yes. Well, the school board, school district, together with myself, in years past, teaching in Selma Elementary and also the director, got together for the school open a number of weeks early. And that was an entire cost for staffing, eating, the whole thing. So that the kids, all the kids in the school could get swimming lessons. At a place like Selma, that's unique because, of course, the rest of the time, you'd either have to travel to Nelson and the trail to get swimming lessons, and that's just not possible. So it gave a lot of kids who normally wouldn't have that chance to get swimming lessons. I don't know if we could ever get back to those good days again, but also at the end of the season, we're being cut a little bit short. Maybe because of staffing, I think so, but I'm not sure. And again, I think that if we could get, they have the pool open over the Labor Day weekend, when it normally is closed just before, I think that would really be excellent. And if we could arrange something like that, I realize it's a special situation, but then again, I can't just say, well, we can't do Labor Day weekend. How would you like Thanksgiving? Yeah. Well, the pool can't be open on Thanksgiving because by then it's going to be frozen. So.
I think staff got noted. Okay, Director Page.
I think I had confidence in the policy. I know we have other pieces on our agenda today. When you have fund allocation under 7, the allocated services framework, which will end up as a policy, that differential between Family Day, between that split, would we envision in the future that would be prorated based on activity? Like if twice as many people are coming through Nelson, it does seem that there should be a proportional allotment of those funds versus an even split, different population basis. And further, you do know the cost ahead of time, so I hope next year we would simply ask for, 8,000, 9,000 to cover the whole thing.
Yeah, so through the chair, exactly. And I think in part because we didn't have some of the information when we went into this whole reactionary comment, that you're absolutely right. We'd have to look at that and to either go, how can we proportion this to get, ultimately is to provide the benefit to the broadest cross-section of the community while representing the differences that may exist. These sponsors, we've been very open with them, the ones that we have spoken to say, this is what we're doing this year. Don't anticipate it might look exactly the same next year, out of concern that any conversation from this group could have altered what that valuation looked like. So I would say that even the ones that we've dealt with would be open to knowing that there could be some differentiation in how we manage that. So.
Okay, and then supplemental. It's small, but it might be one of those little things that adds up. But Brown Nelson paid for is nothing. I see a small amount of donations provided. Could this policy provide room in your programming to create a pay-it-forward program at the front counter, so people could tap and buy a 10-month pass that would put into a pool, or pay a month pass that something would get allocated somewhere else afterwards?
Well, interesting. Through the chair, I have to give that some thought.
But would the policy as written provide that flexibility to envision such a program later on, if it makes sense? All those small individual donations.
I would say, through the chair, I would say that would be something different. Because that feels like we're trying to look at this in this almost like a full day or a full hour for everyone that's coming in. I think it's really interesting, but I think that would be something different because it's at the individual level. and it's going to an anonymous individual. How do we make those two things link up so that it's transparent and not open for criticism? So I think it's something different, but I like the idea.
So I think staff got noted. We'll think on how we can look at it. Great, you good?
Yep.
Okay, Director Lockwood.
Thank you. Through to staff, I just want to go back to sponsorship. So I understand that we don't want to put that this brewery has sponsored some youth program or something like that. Although whether it's alcohol or whatever, cannabis or drugstore that sells cigarettes, everybody has children and may want to sponsor. Is there any way that we have looked at that it's an overall sponsorship, that it's not directly to a program, or have we only looked at that a sponsorship can only be to a program and it cannot be anonymous?
Trisha? So I think two parts. Can it be anonymous? And second part, can they sponsor to the general, not necessarily to a specific program?
So I'm going to say yes and yes through the chair. So absolutely, it could be anonymous. I think it's where, if we're talking about the broader group of people, the way this is envisioned at this moment, when we're talking about the broader group of people, it's really around family activities, even though of course there's individuals and people coming on their own. But my gut feeling is I'm cautious. I almost would want to consult with potentially the commission involved. So say it was somebody specifically in Salmo. My gut feeling is I'd want to have a bit of a conversation around that to make sure that it is both with, say, our general manager or potentially steward, depending on the sensitivity around those topics. Like I don't know that I would feel super comfortable putting a local tap house on a general admission, especially in part because the sponsors often want to have some promotional material, not that they would necessarily have alcohol, but some kind of promotional materials in those spaces. That said, I'm kind of talking on both sides of the fence. I can think of breweries in Nelson right now that are very family oriented. So I don't know, it's a bit of a tough one. I don't know that I have a clean answer at this moment in time.
Follow up on Director Lockwood, but there's flexibility in the sponsorship policy currently to have those conversations at a commission level and make those decisions. Yes, correct? Okay. I think that probably helps Director Lockwood, is to know that there's flexibility in the policy right now to look at the nuances of each situation and to have those conversations. Right.
Yeah, and just a note through the chair that there are actually other rules and regulations that are not our own that limit what can be sponsored to events that are primarily for youth. So it's not just this policy that will govern that.
Okay, great. Are you good, Director Lockwood?
Yeah, I just supplemental. So going with that, I understand that, and I think everybody on the table knows how, and those are three of our business. And I've never actually, yeah.
You are breaking up.
Oh, let me take my video off.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So, as I was saying, is that everybody knows how small Salmo is, and three of those are actually businesses in our small community, and I've never seen where there's been sponsorship for our seniors programs where we advertise saying that so-and-so sponsored this. So I'm just lots of times some businesses aren't worried about sponsorship or about a sign. They just want to be able to promote or make access to other people in the community. And sometimes it will be their children that will be able to access it. So that's all I was trying to get at, is that it's not always about a sign. And if it's anonymous, I don't know why we would put up a sign. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, Director Graham.
Thank you. So, and Director Lockwood just kind of touched on what I was thinking as I'm listening to this, like from a sponsor's perspective, like how am I acknowledged? What do I get? Like if I'm doing a 2-hour swim for $615 or I'm sponsoring a family day for $6,600, like should it be part of the policy that outlines the expectations for what these sponsors are going to get?
So through the chair, Director Graham, it'd take me a second to find it, but there's wording in the framework that basically says we will utilize our existing practices for that acknowledgement. So again, we're trying to not incur additional staff time doing anything totally different in how we go about that acknowledgement. So if our regular ways of advertising or promoting an activity is through, let's say, social media, the local news opportunities, a media release, I don't know, whatever it might be, our leisure guide, that would be our package of how acknowledgement would go. We wouldn't necessarily go and work with that sponsor and go, well, we would like to see a radio ad, and we would like to see something in, the whatever is unique to them. It's really focused around what we already do. That would be made clear as part of our package of information once a sponsor is being confirmed.
Thank you, Director Graham. Yes, your response. Sarah just wants to answer.
I'll just add a little bit for what we've done in the past for these sponsorships. So for Family Day, the organization that sponsored it, we gave them a social media post, we gave them a poster, and then they were allowed to promote themselves in the facilities. So they had items that were there. They had their staff or directors of the organization that were in the facility to hand out items to do that. So that's kind of what we've structured it so far as. And so we wouldn't be going and doing anything crazy extra. We probably also wouldn't be doing a lot of paid advertising on that end. We would be doing mostly promotions that we can facilitate within our own means and facilities that are more free.
You get Director Graham?
Thank you. So some of that stuff is going to be time sensitive. So through the chair, I would just say, like, if you're a sponsor, you're planning to sponsor an event, but you want it in the leisure guide, you would have to plan that. So just a note for staff, since we're changing our approach and we may be starting to solicit this, these are the types of things that the sponsors are going to want to know. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. We do have a motion on the agenda. Does someone feel comfortable making? Yeah, Director Hanegraaff and seconded by Director Page. Any other discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not seeing any opposed. Thank you. Moving on to 7.4, fees and charges for indoor facilities, cost per hour per use. I believe there is another presentation coming up. I see Joe moving.
Like doing that, I'll just regale you with a story about liquor sponsorship. In that, my grandmother used to have it down to the science during the hockey game. That whenever the Molson ad would come on, that remote would hit that TV so fast, and she had it timed perfectly from practice, and she'd turn the TV back on, and you had to wrap it up. She could do that for the whole hockey game consistently.
That is very funny. Okay, over to you, Joe.
Thanks. Through the chair and to the committee. So part of the fees and charges policy, the intent of back in 2019, 2020, when we actually did the majority of the work, was that there would be some truthing of it every 3 years. The truthing of it was, I know that there's lots of people that don't want to hear the word pandemic, but the pandemic did legitimately impact our operations. And I would have loved to have said that we were going to do this, and in fact our intent was to do it in 2024, but 2023 the impact was still there, and the impact was actually still there in 2024. So what I want to in particular start with is that the intent of the policy was that we would be evaluating this on our actual costs of a year. So there's a fundamental difference in this evaluation from what the work was that we did in 2018 with a consultant. And that is that it's not based upon the actual costs of a year. Instead, it is based upon our 2025 budgets. And the reason for that is that 2024, in particular, so just, I know people don't like to hear it, but it's true. Nelson wasn't at full operations in the aquatic center until spring. Crescent and Castlegar never reached full operations of the aquatic environment. The best representation of actual operations is the budget. And so that is a piece. And I need, this is me a little bit, this will be the last time that I lead this kind of an evaluation. I won't be here come this time next year. I will be retiring. I have promised Craig and Tricia and Stuart in particular that whatever I've done for this evaluation will be well documented. But I do, like I talked to Trish actually and Craig just, I think it was on Monday, that the next evaluation I would suggest should be of two, hopefully, crossing my fingers, of 2026 actuals, so you should expect it in 2027. And that may look different because of these. I think those are actually pretty big challenges. So I just want you to know that, and I just want you not to blame them in 2027 if it looks noted. So I want you to give
We
them.
may not be here in 2027, but
Assuming a great deal of will be here.
anyways, moving on.
So we're going to go through calculation of total cost, calculation of total usage, calculation of cost per hour, calculation of cost per individual use, and a staff recommendation, and then conversation. So I kind of like to stand up. I got a teacher in me. So what does total cost include? And this is like Director Jackman, I knew was reading ahead because he was already implying this. So it's all operational expenses for Nelson, Castlegar, and Crescent District Community Complexes. I just want to make sure that we all understand that that doesn't mean that it doesn't impact other services. But those are the biggest services with the biggest costs. And so it's actually, that is where the information, that's the most important information to evaluate. But it's not related to regional parks, meeting rooms, concessions, grounds, outdoor amenity maintenance. So what is fundamentally different between 2018 and right now is we actually, to a large extent, actually have better information than the way we were tracking it back then. Lots of times those costs would be all rolled together and we wouldn't really know. So like why that's important, for example, is that in Crescent there is a large outdoor amenity as part of that operation. In Castlegar, we have all the regional parks in S222. So I need to try and pull all of those costs and get them out of the system for evaluation. The reason that meeting rooms, concession are pulled out is that those are actually funded differently. We have, in some cases, leases. In some cases, in Nelson, we've had to almost operate it for just have someone do it for, like, not pay us anything, just to have the service done. So those costs have to be pulled up. They're funded differently. We also have lease spaces. So in Crescent has the biggest lease space, and that's the curling rink, the arena and the lounge. Those costs need to be pulled out of this evaluation. So just so you know, so those things are all there. And we are at a progression from when we did that in 2018 to today. I would expect that by 2027, we'll actually even be better than. Because I know, like, for Craig, and I think even heard that from Tia's piece, there's a lot of effort going into trying to make sure that we're tracking these things correctly. Oh, sorry. So what total cost does not include? It does not include our capital project costs. So the reason is those kind of skew evaluations. Like, it's there last year. It's like the last year would be the I'm trying to think in Castlegar, well, it's supposed to be the arena roof, and then that project didn't happen. Or this year, it's all of the purchasing of refrigeration equipment for Creston and Nelson are in those budgets. But those are single point in time expenditures. So we still haven't got a good way of really integrating those into this evaluation yet. We have things like grants to other organizations. Those are not included. And registered program costs. And this is a significant difference from 2018, where we actually have, through the good work of Tia and our managers in our centers, really clear idea of what our programming costs are versus our day-to-day operational costs. And so these are, I would primarily call them the costs that we're talking about today, are the costs to be open. So down at the bottom, I have a little bit of an evaluation here. So total cost considered for this process is $6,935,000. Total costs considered in program fees and leases.
They're seeing this on two different screens.
Oh,
It's okay.
is it frozen again?
They are seeing, it's okay, we are seeing.
Oh, sorry, you know what? I did think that I had clicked the button, but looking at that screen, I thought, oh, I didn't click the button. And I'm still on this screen right now. To everybody online, you're still seeing the slide with calculation of total perfect. Okay, thank you, Carrie. I was looking at that one. So total cost considered in this process is $6,935,319. Total costs that are in program fees, leases, all of those other things is $7,511,000. And costs that I'm not considering, wouldn't be considered in either of those evaluations, is over $3 million. To note that. And so, again, those are a lot of the things like the things that we would never actually have a fee for, or grants, or those kinds of things that we're giving. All right, so now it's going to be a problem. Is that one? Is it? I know that online they're seeing this.
They're saying, just keep on going.
Okay.
It's just Director Page.
I'm just gonna.
I think he's up on the screen too.
So this is total cost of usage. And so in this area, we actually have a lot of good information. And actually, I just want to compliment Eric. I say Eric Chamara, could be Eric Chamara, being Italian, I want to add make that a K. But Eric is works with us on managing our software and really making it work for our needs. So what's really interesting about this report, it tells me how many different sessions, so I've just got the Castlegar pieces up here, how many different sessions were booked, how many hours that equals that it was utilized, and do not pay attention to hours available, because right now that's just running on a 24-hour clock and it doesn't know seasons. So I'm going to add something that's a little more specific to that later on. But this is where I wanted to show you. For example, Castlegar Kootenai room is actually a complicated room. It says there's 189 sessions or 470 sessions, 1,507 hours utilized. It's not quite right. It is right, but it's wrong because it's actually some of those sessions are rolled into a lease for the senior center. So like that's actually not I can't get that some of that time back in fees and charges. So, and what I also have to do here is I also have to do an estimation using this to try and calculate total usage. And so I gave a little bit of an example of what we would do in Arena to do that. We know that, and we're not talking about people sitting in the stands watching, we're just talking about participants on the ice. Like that needed to be something, we need to kind of draw a box around what that is, or else it would really skew it. I use the number 25, so if I, on the ice, if I know that there's those sessions, that's individual ice times, and I would multiply that by 25 to get an estimate.
Or just use the mouse and click on the screen.
Yeah.
No, that's not the screen word.
Thank you. So, calculation of total usage. So activities. So activities are another area that bring people into our facilities and those kinds of things. So activities are actual programs. So in this case, the slide shows you an example of a report. This is swimming lessons. I hope that's the biggest swimming lessons in the leisure pool in Creston. And what this tells me is that the first two columns that have numbers in them, that's how many people registered in person, how many people, the next column is how many people registered online, and the third column is total registrants in those classes. So that tells me that, for example, a Parenton Top 3 Seahorse had 6 people register in that class, but that's not 6 visits. That's actually 60 visits because that class that's 10 sessions. So I actually then go through that and calculate how many actual visits that is. The visits are what's important from that because that helps inform the total usage. I can go to the next one. Individual admissions. This is actual. So this is an actual number. So this is paid admissions. So in 2024, we had 150,000 admissions into Nelson, Creston, or Castlegar programs. The reason I specifically showed this example is that what you're seeing here, you'll see the number on the right-hand side. It says we're going to do the top line, it says 1,064. So what that means, you'd actually have to divide 1,064 by 4 here, 1 adult, 3 children. that would give you the number of actual points because they're paying a family pass. But what our software does, when they do that, our front desk team, and this is part of the standardization piece, our front desk team tells us who came. So in this case, although they paid family, it was 1 adult and 3 children. So we know that. So then we actually do a calculation. That's 4. So for every admission, that gets added up. So 149,668. When you go to the next one. Membership admissions. This is really accurate, but this takes some wizardry on Eric and Trisha's part to actually get the number, because it doesn't tell us a number. We actually have to essentially tell Excel, count the numbers. But what this tells you, we know exactly, I took it out of this, but we know what time someone scanned in. Normally right here, there would actually be the name of the pass holder. That's removed. Tells you what type of pass they held, where they signed in. So Nelson POS 1 is actually a particular station. And this might tell you, sometimes this will tell you something specific about a place where they were saying that they were going. So then that calculates all up to 293,198 scans in Creston, Castlegar, and Nelson. So this exercise is so much about costs and money. I do want to point out that's a significant number of people using these facilities. And so I know that sometimes when we do these, it feels like that's what we're focusing on, but we're not. This is just, it's a calculation. Just know that these are very well-used facilities. And I know there's often this conflict that budget time, we're really worried about costs, and sometimes we can forget about this. And then at other times where there's requests for service increases, we hear that and forget about the cost. And this is where we're trying to bring those two things together. So we can go to the next one. Calculation of total usage. There's a fundamental shift in this, in how we're doing this. So for usage as in individual usage, 625,419 estimated individual usages. I'm going to tell you right now, I believe that's low. I did not, whenever we did these estimates, I always do them on the conservative side of that. So, but that shows you still, even with that tremendous amount of usage. So that number, 625,419, is going to get used in calculations. Facility hours available for public use. We have a lean meeting with managers every last Thursday. And this was actually a topic of conversation in that meeting. Fitness hours and aquatic hours are really easy to calculate. Those are our opens. And the thing, because we have a fundamental belief that every hour we are open is a public open opportunity. So what that means is this is fundamentally different between arenas. So we know this number can kind of directly relate to these hours. Because you can always, as a public member, come in, and if we're open, go into those spaces. So this is not based upon actual hours in 2024. Those are hours based upon if we were fully operational according to what the target is set by each individual commission for those services. So that's what that is. Arena hours. This is fundamentally different from 2018. The way I'm using this in the calculations that are further on. There are 10,751 available hours to rent in the ice season. In 2018, this is where we spent a lot of time philosophically going through this question. So what this means, in this case, after some conversation, we mean if the building is open and the arena ice is in from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And then we wipe out ice cleans. So that means 13 hours a day. Right, so 13 hours is actually, so that 10,751 hours is representative of 13 available hours that actually use the ice. What we actually used was 6,184. And these two numbers have very different results when you look at cost per hour use. In the summertime, there's approximately 4,719 hours available hours for dry floor use. This is something that our facilities are really working on changing how we do this. We used to be incredibly passive, like, we just turn off the lights, lock the doors. But you'll see, like, in Creston in particular is probably the furthest advanced in this, where that floor will have basketball nets on it, pickleball nets, everything. So it's going to be, we're trying to make it just in the summertime, it's pay your drop-in fee, go use the floor, go use the fitness center, go use the aquatic center. So those are the important things. We can go on to the next one. Please just interrupt if there's anything.
We'll let you finish. Is that a running?
Sarah, can we just move that? I think there's more room on the other side. Oh, sorry.
Those online, just keep your questions written and we'll let Joe go through his whole presentation and then we'll go to questions. Otherwise, I think we'll get derailed by lots of mini conversations in the midst of it, so.
We'll note that on this, some things actually go down. Some things actually go down, and there's logic to that. But what we do for the cost per hour, I take those two pool total hours against the cost for the pool. I divide that, and the actual important line to note is pool, whole space, no public. So when we did the chart in 2018, unfortunately, Tricia and I spent months last year really going through the charts. And what we realized is there was a breakdown in the chart and that there was no relationship to the lane unit. There was actually no relationship between these things. So what that means is that for the pool space in 2024, we would have estimated that to be $316.32 an hour. In 2025, based upon our budgets, it's $371 per hour. But where the reason the pool lap per lap lane actually comes down is there was a miscalculation in here that set it originally too high. And so each of these, as you go through pool per lap lane to pool, full lap pool, these numbers are now actually related together. If you look at this number and that number, there's no way that's 6 lanes, right? This would be 6 lanes would be way more than 158.16. So like that's the problem. So we readjusted, and this part is a little bit of estimation, but it's estimation of total pool space. So this is the pool, full lap pool at 222.60. Full leisure teach pool at 74.20, and just the other leisure areas in the pool. So in Creston, I don't think anybody, if you've been to Creston, you'll know that's our nicest facility for a pool. And there's a very distinct, it's actually the the Creston Valley Aquatic Society paid actually during capital construction, paid for there to be a large beach pool. So that's what that represents. Nelson is there. Castlegar's a little bit smaller. But that's what those areas are. Fitness, again, is pretty easy. I do the calculation of the fitness space. I actually, but this is the total operation hours of fitness against its cost. It's 181.08. That number's more meaningless for fitness because fitness doesn't really work that way. It's not really a renting space. It's more of a space. Arenas. This is where there's an actual decision and one, I'm suggesting that we take a little bit of a different approach. In 2017, our actual use was $292 an hour. Available use was $153. If you understood, just to understand what that means is that the way we were looking at arena ice was that even though it was available, it was never being used to that full availability. So in 2018, and I shouldn't say this wasn't just staff, there was conversations, because there was a number of workshops, as Gary will remember, hence, where we went through this and we chose to use the actual use as that number. 2024, this was actually in the report last year when we made the strategy about how do we get arena users closer to the target rate for what they should be paying. So, in one way to look at it, it was actual use is 261.06. If a service had one arena, if it has two arenas, it was 419.21. There's a reason for that. Civic Center is used, I think, I have this, I don't know if I have it in the report, I've got the number. I'm going to be talking about it with the Nelson Commission, but Civic Center and Pioneer, when those are open, they're only actually using 50% of their capacity. The other rinks are just over 60. So when you have that secondary ice sheet and it's not utilized, it drives up your overhead costs. That's what that is an indication of. If I was to use actual use based upon what our budget is, it would be $504.65. And that is because usage is actually is slowly going down. Available use, so if I use that available use, it's $290.27. What I'm suggesting is that we actually use this rate as our measuring stick. It actually doesn't change our philosophy on where our rates are right now. You'll see that when we look at the actual rate, sheet. But I think it's the only realistic number that we can come to. The real question is how much of this service we provide. That's the actual real question. Arena dry floor, you can see if we were to look at that, the hourly use would be $3,023, and that's just strictly a result of the fact that we don't have many rentals in there in the way we are using that space, or the way I'm even considering it in here. If I was considering this that we actually use that arena dry floor in the summertime like we are in Preston, this number goes way down, because then I'm saying it's available to everybody, right? So that's a big piece. So available, and that's why that available use goes down to $99 an hour. So again, actual use in 2025 is 2,370, so a little bit better than 2017, but available use is 131.60. Any questions on that part?
We're gonna keep on going.
Okay,
Get
perfect.
right through, and
Okay.
I'm keeping a list, and then we'll go.
All right. And I think, is there another one? Oh, there it is. Thank you. So in 2017, this is part of that consistency piece. I kind of admit, TT's report almost made me cry because she's just nailing so many things perfectly that we need to do. In 2017, we really didn't have a good idea on A, how many people were actually using the center. B, we had no consistent business practice across the three centers, so things weren't recorded in the same way. So anyways, this is approximately how we worked this out. In 2017, we were actually trying to figure out how many people use it compared to the cost, how many people use the fitness center according to the cost, and how many people use the arena. And you can see that's what that $16, $29, $8.47, and $24 means. So what that is an indication of is the cost, but more importantly, how many people use that space. So fitness has the lowest cost, but also had a high use for that space. Pool has a higher cost and actually has a higher use, but it still works out to a higher number. So then what we did in 2017, we said, wow, we're going for one fee. How does this actually break out? Well, we said, oh, maybe 45% of people are primarily going to the pool. So we use that. 42% are primarily going to fitness. We use that. And 13% are primarily going to the arenas. We use that. So $14.01. All at 2024, that 1616 just represents the inflationary increases over the year. But 2025, this is why that 625,419 is so important. This calculation to get 1675, really all it is adding that, dividing it by that would equal 1675. So under the philosophy of one fee, anyone can use any space. You use the total number of participants and get to 1675. So that's the good news there is that our calculations have somehow worked over time. Approximately, we're a little bit out of inflation, but pretty good. And I think this is actually an easier model to understand and be speeds on. All right, we'll go to the next one. Oh, sorry, what's important there is that that's our staff recommendation for this. The hourly rates are based all on those fees on that other previous slide. The big important piece of that one is that we're recommending that arenas be used at $290 an hour, not the 500.
Okay, are we good?
Yep.
Great. Okay, I've got a list of questions here. Director Brackman, Graham, and Tate, if I can speak. Director Brackman.
Great. Thanks through the chair again. 2 points. The first one, future information. Couldn't answer it today anyway, I'm sure. But there's that big gap between if ice is used when it's available versus when it's actually used. So for 2026 budget, it would be nice to see utilization rates per month, every month, because we tried putting early ice in. That was huge expense for little return. What is used in August, September, etc. And that'll help us maybe understand part of the gap in those numbers and whether or not we put the ice in a week or two earlier or later. The other one that can't answer, but I think we should all have confidence. You mentioned, Joe, that you're not including all the capital because of the difficulty, but we're on the verge of that, I think, as an organization. Either you're going to have a high facility condition index, which means we have relatively new facilities and we have a lot of borrowing costs we're paying back. So that's one element. Or we have a lot of work to do in the future and our capital asset management plan will say you need this much in reserve every year. And you add those two together, Creston will be, lots of borrowing cost and not so much future, and Castlegar might be lots of future cost and not so much current borrowing. Those would be the numbers that would be added on to the true cost. And surely we're going to have those by 2027. Or 2027.
And through the chair, yes. Honestly, I was hoping that we would have that report last fall, but it's going to be this fall. But I agree. And I thought I'm just gonna. I know that Kate's got a question, Councillor Tate, but I thought she had we had a couple public meetings last week, and she talked about I thought was a good idea. She talked about we would have possibly start talking about a surcharge on admissions or on things to completely frame out capital in this discussion, and I thought that is something that's definitely worth considering, because it might be an easier way of trying to explain fees to the public.
Okay, Director Jackman?
Yep.
Director Graham?
Thank you. So through the chair to Joe. Joe, there was a lot of information in your presentation that was not included in the report, and the presentation was not attached in eScribe. And sadly, I'm watching this on a smaller screen, and I couldn't see the numbers. So my question is, could these presentations be attached in eScribe?
Through the chair, we will. Just for me, I had 2 public meetings last week and so I literally finished this at 8:30 last night. So, but we will. Yes.
Fair enough. And my second question, if I may, supplemental through the chair.
Yep.
Is there a combined all-rec financial statement? I've been looking through the financial plan and I don't see one.
No. Sorry, I don't understand. Sorry, Cheryl, just to make sure I'm clear. If you're if we're looking for a combined community services statement with all the services in community services, no. If we're talking about the community services in the terms of community services fees, yes, that's A104 and A109. Would that be fair?
Yeah, through the chair, I think Director Graham's referring to an operational statement that might combine all of the rec services, though.
Sorry, through the chair, that I can do that. That's in fact how I did the evaluation.
Thank you, Joe. Could that be shared with the commission members, please?
Yeah, if we give me just a little bit of leeway on when I get that done, because I just got to make sure it prints out in a way that makes sense.
You get Jeff Graham? Okay, Councillor Tate.
Thanks. I'm with Director Graham. Sometimes when you face away from the microphone, we can't hear everything, and what you were showing is different than what's in the agenda. So that was a little bit challenging for me. I have a curiosity around the actual available, and this just occurred to me, and because it's a little bit apples and oranges, and here's why. When the ice is in, if we're counting 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. as being available hours, do I understand that correctly?
That's the hours that we chose, yes, and then we reduced, and then we reduced it to 13 hours.
Take away the ice cleans.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, I wrote that down. So I think it's a little different though, because when the fitness center doors are open, public can go in anytime, because those are the opening hours. Same with the pool. But for the arena, it has to be programmed. Is that not correct? It either has to be rented or programmed. You can't just drop in and skate, even though the ice is in and we're counting it as available hours.
No. So through the chair, that's why I'm suggesting that we use 290 and not 504.65. 500 and because Kate, to your exact point, because I think what the challenge is for us as commissions and staff is to make those hours available to the public so that we can get higher usage out of the space. So it's not just in these very slotted times. I think we have a lot of work to do. And I think when Tina was even talking in her report about rethinking arenas in a way, in particularly driven because of the closure of Pioneer and last year in Nelson because of the partial closure through the year of the Civic Center. We're trying to rethink arenas. How do we make it so that it's actually more available for public use? So it's not restricted just by that strict programming time of a public skate at 1 to blah, 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 and every rental hour in there. So that's why suggesting that we use available use as the calculator for that.
Councillor Tate, do you have a follow-up?
No, I'll let that settle, and I look forward to the slide deck. Thanks.
Yeah, and for those online, if you were having issue with sound, just put sound. You write sound in the chat. That way I know to flag it that something's going on in the room.
Yeah, and through the chair, every one of those slides that had a number on it, that's all on page 4 of the report.
Great. Okay. Director Jackman for a second time.
Thank you. The question around sort of the roll up and the whole cost to rec, these total costs, I think that's been part of what kind of been an ongoing conversation about budget presentation and public understanding. And I wouldn't presume public's ever going to understand all of this stuff unless we understand it. So I had done during this rolling conversation, if you do some roll-ups and you want to know where is the cost of recreation, parks, rec, facilities, it's about $24.8 million a year in terms of what we're bringing in to run those services versus fires, $11.5 million, $9.8 million on water, waste, $22.7 million. Before you know it, you add in emergency services, stuff like this, whatever, you end up with more than $70 million. Not all taxation, a lot of it's fees, other stuff. But those gross numbers, when you break it out, you say, well, recreation is fully a third of this, total, period. And why are we doing it? So I think as we move towards having Stuart and Yev and get a better handle on how do we explain to people what are we doing and why are we doing it? People wanted me to read, what is our mandate? And what is this? What is during a budget meeting? I said, you know what, I'm going to use simple terms. RDCK does stuff the province tells us to do, like it or not. Do waste, do this, do that. We do stuff the province entices us to do. Outdoor regional parks, because we can borrow money and it's easy to do, or because we see social benefit within our community, and indoor recreation, which we can't just borrow money for, we need a cent. And then we do other stuff. But simple language, what do we do and why do we do it? And where does that big pie cut? And a third of it's recreation. And if it's of no value, tell us. But I think it's an excellent question. I think Director Graham asked it. They're getting that really big picture understanding. This is the biggest thing we do, pretty much. Recreation, parks, trails. And let's get it out there to everyone. And also so we understand all moving pieces of this.
Thanks, Dr. Jackman. Okay, so I don't have enough on the list, and we do have a motion in the agenda. Does someone want to move that motion or have a different motion, or?
I'll move it as stated, knowing it includes those 2 reduced rates, right?
So the actual motion in the agenda, I just want to make sure because there is an alternative that we're moving, that everyone's clear on which one you're moving. And if it's on the agenda, I can read it for you if you want. Have you got it?
Yeah, the one, as per agenda,
That the board-
total cost capacity is outlined in the table in the attached report for policy based on, calculation of fees and charges, but that uses the lower ice and the lower dry floor. I understand. I move that one, it's in each drive as the recommendation.
Great. You have a second? Seconder. Any other discussion on that? I'm not seeing any. All those in favor? And any opposed? Not seeing any opposed, that passes. So we have 3 minutes and one more full report. Is this report time sensitive?
Yes, this is actually more time
Okay,
sensitive.
great. We're gonna go into the full report. I do recognize that there is another meeting at 1, and we had asked for these meetings to be extended by half an hour, and it didn't get caught on this one. So hopefully the next ones they will be, and we'll integrate that into our budget, because we always seem to need at least an extra half an hour. So I've already flagged that. I see that Walter, thank you. You have to leave at noon. So we're gonna go as quick as we possibly can to 7.5.
So the easiest thing maybe to do here is to just go to the attachment A. So that's in the report. So that's page 43 of the agenda, if that's what that number means at the bottom there. The attached fees actually represent the information from the previous report. The fees in this are either directly related to the previous report as per the subsidizations in the policy, or they're increased by 2.6%. So meeting rooms and fields in particular are increased by the CPI. Arena fees, because they weren't at the target rate before. Last year, when we discussed this, we had a choice of increasing arena fees by 10% or by CPI plus 5, and the committee, and thus the board eventually, chose CPI plus 5, and that's what the arena fee increase represent. So that would be 7.6%. And so essentially in this report, you're recommending the schedule of fees and charges for 2025, 2026 as of September 2nd, I believe it is, this year.
Great. Alana, I'm just flagging that you're gonna keep track of, make sure we don't lose quorum. Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions? I'll let you have a chuckle and then I'll add you, Jackman. Director Newell.
Well, hi. Is there any value? I know it's late, and and I have to get there to chair the next meeting. Is there any value through the chair to not having $8.13, but rounding it to $8, for example?
Through the chair, most technically in today's day and age of Visa and debit card payments and everything like that, we're not really usually, and the fact that we round pennies when they get the system rounds pennies, there's not really. Note that this is pre GST, so the GST is not included in these, so they're not the final price anyways. And I think one of the reasons over time that we ended up getting in trouble with not knowing what our fees represented was because of those kinds of switches and indiscriminate changes. So I would say I don't see a disadvantage to it being $8.13.
That was my second question, was GST included? Thank you.
Director Graham. Does that mean she left, or does that mean Director Graham? Are you there? Okay, not seeing her. We're going to continue on. Director Jackman.
I'll move this staff recommendation that we recommend to the board they approve the following schedule of fees and charges for admissions be implemented for September 2nd, 2025 as per attachment A.
Seconded. Great. And Director Lockwood.
Sorry, my computer wouldn't let me use my mouse, so I apologize. I just need a clarification because this looks like it's just for the fitness center in Salmo. Is there something, am I missing something for the swimming pool?
Through the chair to the Director Lockwood. No, we saw them figured out. I'm hoping that this year what we'll institute in Salmo for the summertime that the pool is open is that fee is charged and you can use either of the two facilities while they're both available.
Director Lockwood?
Okay, we're going to have a discussion about that at our rec commission.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh,
Director Graham, I noticed you had on the list. Did you have a question? I'm coming back to you. If you end up coming back, Director Graham, and you have a question, just unmute, okay? Councillor Tate.
Thanks very much. I'm just looking on the page 2 here. And I just got a little bit muddled because at the top you have the recovery rates, but then as you go through it, there's those passes have a different recovery rate. And I didn't understand where that came from.
Sorry, you're talking page 2 of the report?
I think that's what, is that not,
Yeah.
it's page 40? Yeah, okay, I think so. Yeah.
So through to Kate, what page? Which question are we? Which one of the recovery rates are we trying to understand?
All of them. Like at the top, it shows that 75-25, but then as you go through, for youth, for example, it's different, and that's just based on the fact that with the passes you actually use more per, probably. It's just a guess. Is it a guess?
No. So it actually tells you. So, for example, because you're discounting the rate.
Yeah.
So then that means the recovery rate, the recovery rate goes down, the cost that's covered by taxation technically would go up. So the 10 signal admission, I'm positive that in here, or maybe I accidentally removed it. When we do the passes, we assume that somebody is using it 3 times a week.
Yeah, it's the guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a guess. Good.
Great, thanks. Okay, we'll quickly, hopefully, get to vote here. Director Graham.
Oh, thank you. So sorry I lost connection there.
Oh, we can't hear you. I'm not sure where you're unmuted, but you're good? Okay, just message if you have any questions, okay? Okay, any other questions from anyone? Not seeing any. Okay, I'm going to call question on the motion. All those in favor? And any opposed?
Did anyone move the motion?
Yeah, Director Jackman did it. I think Cunningham seconded it. Okay, none opposed, so that passes. Great. Okay, there's nothing under old business, I don't believe, besides the action item list, but we're going to skip that. Great. I was like, we're just going to skip it for now. We're just going to move it right to the next meeting because there's nothing specific under there. 8.2 is just for Director Newell's motion for next meeting. Public time. Do we have any public? We do have one public. Public, if you want to unmute and ask any questions, you are welcome to do so now. Not seeing any. All right, next meeting is at June 25th, and please note, and I have asked staff, we're going to book these meetings from till 12:30, just so we're not feeling rushed at the end, and we'll make sure that we have some time to finish up the conversations. And on that, I call for adjournment. All those in favor? Great, thanks everyone online, see you guys later.
Question.
Yes.
Instead of going till 12:30, we start half an hour earlier because I'm going to be up anyway.
Well, that's you.
Ah!